So quickly, I would lighten this up, right? I would make some quick adjustments to this. So I go down into here. These are layer adjustments. Again, my other Photoshop tutorials for photo editing go way more in depth. So I'm just gonna, if I'm going too fast with this stuff, the Photoshop Essentials tutorials that I have on the Media and Design Learning website go into this stuff in way more detail. So I'm just gonna go to levels. I'm going to adjust those levels. And there you go, I've lightened that up a bit. So that's one quick way of dealing with that, right? I've got that lightened up. I could go down here. I might go to the hue saturation and increase the saturation. Okay. And then if I'm done that, I'm going to make a copy of the background layer. I'm going to shift select all these layers here. I'm going to right click. I'm going to merge those layers together. Now, if I was to try to create like a vector illustration inside of Photoshop, I'll be struggling. Like if I was to try to zoom in here, go into the pen tool and such and kind of start creating like a logo illustration out of this, Photoshop will be like, you'll be frustrated with it. It's really built for photo editing. So lightening images, saturating images are great for Photoshop. I could put filters on these, which I'm about to show you. So if I was to make all this in Photoshop, if I wanted to make my coat of arms a little bit cooler in Photoshop, I would probably start a new document. So I'm going to go File, New. Just going to do it 8.5 by 11 and create that over here. I'm going to bounce between these two documents. Again, I could tear them off if I wanted to, or dock them at the top. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to select. So I'm going to go to the marquee here. I'm going to go and I'm going to marquee select areas of this coat of arms that I want. And I'm just going to go copy, Command or Control C. And I'm going to paste it over here, Command or Control V. So I've pasted that over here. So I could go, I'm just going to go and grab a couple of these images here. Marquee select this one, copy, and paste it. And then I could start moving these around. I have a lot more flexibility now. I've copied and pasted these into a new document, moving them around, right? If I liked the stroke around here, but I didn't copy and paste the stroke over, the reason I did that is this is a little bit skewed. This will be perfectly squared up. So what I could do now is I could go down here. I'm going to go down into here and then go down to this FX or layer styles area. And this is where you find stroke. So you can actually put a stroke around something if you want to make it a little bit more graphic. And I can adjust the size and the color and all that. This is also where you have, if you don't want stroke, but you want a drop shadow, drop shadows down here. So you could throw a drop shadow on something if you want, and change all those settings there and go, okay. So I got a cool drop shadow on this part of the coat of arms. You can also right click on the layer and you can copy it's called layer style. That FX wording is a layer style. So I could copy the layer style, could go to this one, right click, and then you can paste the layer style. So you don't have to redo it all the time. And then now this gives me a bit more creative options. I could overlay things and kind of move these things around. So that would be my recommendation, is go around to these different parts, marquee select them, and then copy and then paste them over into a new document, because you're going to have a lot more freedom as when you paste them into the new document, they're in their separate layers, and then you can move them around and mix and match them. You can throw strokes or drop shadows on them. That'd be my recommendation. And that's what Photoshop's good for. If you want some quick layout thing, you want some quick brightening and hue saturation, it's an awesome program for that. Likewise, it's got some pretty decent filters. If you want to be if you want to throw some filter on top of one of these images here, I could go and start experimenting with filters. There's a filter gallery here you can start going inside of, and you can start throwing on different filters to see what they look like and just go around and start playing around with them. Sketch might look kind of cool. So what it's actually doing here is Photoshop is picking up the foreground and background colors and applying them to the filter. So I'm going to cancel all this. I'm going to show you. You see the background colors is kind of beigey, yellowish color. If I double click on that and I change the color, keep this black, but let's just say I want to make it like a little bit more gray. So there's my new foreground and background color. I go back up to filter. I go back up to filter gallery. I go back to sketch and go to stamp, and then you can see that's what it's done, and I can go okay. And so that's kind of like you could throw filters on your kind of images in Photoshop, and you can do all that. Okay, so that's about like the extent of what I would be doing if I was doing some vector art or some artistic looking thing in Photoshop. Great for photo manipulation, great for copying, pasting things and other things, great for filters. And then now what I'm going to show you for a minute is if you wanted to actually create this as a vector art thing, that's where I would open this up into Illustrator. I'm going to save this. Save as. I'm going to save it on my computer here. It defaults to saving it as a Photoshop file. So I'm going to do coat of arms. And I'm going to save that into my thing here as a Photoshop file. I'm going to go OK. Then I'm going to save it as a JPEG. When you hand things into me, please don't hand in the Photoshop files or the Illustrator files. Please hand everything in as JPEGs or PNGs. So I'm going to go File. I'm going to go Save As again. And I'm going to go to this little selection area, and I'm going to go JPEG. And I'm going to save that as a JPEG. I'm going to close this now. I'm going to close all this stuff down. And I'm going to show you the difference between a Photoshop file and a JPEG file. So I'm going to open both of those up again in Photoshop. So there's the .psd file. I'm going to open that. You see how the Photoshop files kept all of the layers. So I can go in and I can re-edit it if I want to. If I go File, Open, and open up the JPEG, you see the JPEG does not have the layers. It's just it flattened the image and saved it as a JPEG. So the file size is going to be, the JPEG file size is going to be smaller. It's a compressed file. It doesn't save the layers. That's what I want submitted if you're doing images for your projects. You will want to probably save it as Photoshop files if you're working on it for a few days, because you're going to want to re-edit these layers. That's the difference between the two.